You're listening to Business in Bloom, a podcast for creative female entrepreneurs and a home to honest conversations about the ups and downs of running your own business. I'm your host and self-belief business coach, Anna Dunleavy, and we'll explore topics on self-doubt, following your intuition, and why self-limiting beliefs might be holding you back. Hello, and welcome back to episode 82. You are listening to Business in Bloom, previously known as the Fearless Hustle Collective. I am really excited to introduce today's guest, Daniela, who is the founder of Women Make Stories, where she teaches mindfulness and writing, and where she helps women to tell their stories. We talked about what brought Daniela to this work, how she juggles running a business alongside part-time work, and the importance of sharing our unique point of view. So let's dive right in. Hi Daniela, thank you so much for joining me today. Why don't we start with you just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Hi Anna, thanks so much for having me. It's actually my first podcast, so I'm so honored to be here. So my name is Daniela. I'm a writer, a mindfulness teacher, and the founder of Women Make Stories, which is a purpose-led business that offers writing and mindfulness workshops and one-to-one sessions to women.
Amazing. So what I would love to hear a little bit more about, I guess, is the story and that kind of journey to, where you are now, and how did the business really start first, perhaps?
Yes, sure. So I officially launched the business in September 2020. But I always say that the business kind of like started in my head way before that. So I always knew that I wanted to work for myself for a long time, but I had like so many ideas and I just couldn't really narrow that down. And then I think at the time, like I wasn't even sure whether that was possible for me to kind of like create a career on my own and for myself. But then in 2018, my career took kind of like a different turn. So since graduating, so I have a degree in creative and professional writing, and I've always worked in communications. And then in 2018, I just felt like really stuck in this job, and I was unhappy. And for me, that was a really pivotal moment because I knew, okay, something is happening here. I was also like sick all the time. So I felt like my body and my mind were kind of like telling me that I needed to change. And so I was going through quite a lot of things. And then at the time as well, I was introduced to mindfulness. And I started to kind of like practice mindfulness for myself as well. And I could see the benefit that it had on myself. And I also decided at the time to kind of like go out of my little bubble and attend careers events for women in the creative industry. And that was really helpful because I just kind of like sat there and listened to women's stories, and all of a sudden I thought, oh, it's not just me kind of like going through all of these issues. I just felt like less lonely, understood. And I remember like there was one night where I kind of like, I left that building and I felt like so inspired by the stories I've heard. And again, that was kind of like, I know it sounds like a cliche, but that's where I had like my light bulb. And I was like, I know what I want to do. Like it's so clear in my head. And from there, I kind of like planted the seed of Women Make Stories. I was like, okay, I know the direction. I want to combine mindfulness and writing. I really want to create something that plays with my strengths. And then since then, I kind of like worked on it, like slowly, did like all my mindfulness qualifications and other things to help me. I guess that's how it all started.
Yeah. I love that you were really kind of, obviously you attended some like career events and that was the real inspiration. And I guess that almost, in a sense, maybe permission slip to be like, actually, other people do this too. And so, you can go for it.
Yeah, that was incredible. Like the stories I've heard and talking to other women as well, like attendees as well. I'm a bit of a shy person, so I was like, oh, I don't know how it's going to be. But everybody was like super welcoming. You could tell that, they all wanted to share their stories. And, there was so much that resonated with me. And it was just very encouraging. And I think it was also about knowing that you're not alone in those struggles. it was very important for me at the time to know, okay, I'm not the only one that feels stuck, that feels like unhappy. There are so many women out there. So I think my response was, what can I do as well to help myself and to help other women? So that's also why I wanted to create Women Make Stories as well.
I love that. And I think there is so much power in kind of listening to other people's stories and knowing and realizing that you're not alone in, you know, the struggles that you might be going through. And I think that's actually sometimes probably one of the like biggest things, actually, isn't it? It's just kind of like it's almost feels like that weight off your shoulders a little bit, because it's like, oh, okay, I'm not alone, and other people have experienced this and have worked through it. And so it kind of, again, it just reiterates that you're able to do that too.
Exactly. It gives you so much courage, I think. And a different perspective.
Absolutely. And so I'm curious whether hearing these stories, you know, women who run their own businesses, did that have kind of an impact on you know, creating Women Make Stories, or was that already kind of a seed that had been planted, you know, perhaps before?
It definitely had like a big impact, although I knew that I wanted to do something with writing, because that's always been my passion. And I felt very frustrated in certain industries and jobs because I wasn't creative enough. I think, you know, the world of communication had changed dramatically since I've started. And I've always been passionate about stories. Like my first jobs when I was working for universities was actually to go out and interview students or interview like academics, finding out their stories. And then like the best ways to kind of like translate those stories. And then all of a sudden, everything changed because it was all about digital marketing. It was all about like KPIs, and it was different. And as much as you try to kind of like learn new skills, I was like, well, I'm not really writing that much. Like, what about those stories? You know, what about listening to them? And I remember like it was so good to sit down and listen to other people's dreams. And, you know, all the students coming from different countries. It was just so, I was so grateful to be in that job. So I really missed this element of stories and storytelling. And so then when I was in that room listening to women's stories, I was like, yes, you know, this makes sense again. You know, I need to go back to those roots. So yeah, it kind of like gave me the inspiration and to say, yes, this is what I wanted to do. Like I've always wanted to do this. And it's, yeah, like you said, a bit of a validation. Yes, you know, I can do this. It makes sense. It's important to do this, to share stories and to give women the space to actually feel comfortable to share their own stories if they want to, and to write about them. So yeah, I guess it was super important.
So you lead me on to my next question very nicely, but I wanted to ask about the kind of importance of women sharing their stories, and what is it about that specifically that you're so passionate about, I suppose. And I guess my other question is that what happens when we open up and share our story with others?
Yeah, so I think because I've studied creative writing and most of my lecturers were women, which was incredible as well. They always encourage us to share our story and write about our stories. And they always said, you know, your story is worth telling and it's important. So I always want to kind of like reiterate this message every time I do my workshops, or, you know, when I write about stories on my social media as well, because it's so important that we know that our story are important and that we don't need other people to validate our stories or our experiences. And, you know, we see this happening so many times that, you know, women's stories are kind of like played down or not believed, and I think we have to kind of like, as much as we can, actually say, no, we exist, we're here, we have a story, whatever that is, and whatever we, you know, whether we decided to publish that stories or just to keep it for our own eyes, it doesn't matter. It's equally important that we continue to write or express ourselves in, you know, whatever way we want to express ourselves. Because, you know, it could be like through painting or coloring or photography, you know, that's always telling stories for me. And yeah, I think it's just incredibly important that women know about this, and that we continue to reinforce this message. And that we don't listen to those people that kind of like gave us those advice that we don't want, that, you know, our story isn't important, or, you know, we're not able to tell our stories, or our story isn't good enough. And I think it's kind of like two strengths. At times it could be external people, and at times, you know, we can be a bit harsh on ourselves, you know. Our inner critic saying, oh, you know, why are you writing this? Why are you wasting time? You know, you're not good enough. So it's like we have to fight two battles here. But you know, yeah, I think it's just super important. And sharing stories, it's important as well, because although as women, I feel like we go through similar issues at times, and we have so much in common, so many elements, and stories, you know, are universal, so we can always learn from other people. But at the same time, I think it's important that we remember that we're all unique, and as women as well, we're all unique. So as much as I hear your story and I can feel like, oh yes, I can see myself in your story, then I also need to understand that I'll never be you. I'll never fully understand your struggle. So it's important that I hear from you, that I hear your point of view, that I hear like that's, you know, we hear multiple stories, multiple point of views, multiple voices. Because yeah, stories are universal, but they're also unique. And I think it's important that, you know, as women, we know that we're here for other women. We're here to listen to them, not to judge them when we hear their stories. You know, it's important that we know that women are supported. Yeah, and I think through stories and through sharing, we learn a lot. We feel inspired. You know, we never really know when we tell our stories. You know, there's always somebody that needs to hear that story, right? We never really know how much we touch other people. Yeah, so I think as women, it's important that we are reminded about this as much as we can, you know, because our stories are powerful. And I think women's stories can really change existing narratives as well. So yeah, I'm like always encouraging women, tell your story if that's what you want, and don't be afraid, you know, to own that story.
I think you've touched on something that kind of comes up in, you know, the conversations that I have, and when I listen to other women talk, that very often we feel like our story isn't worth telling, or perhaps that we kind of question ourselves whether, you know, there's anything of value that we might have to add. And so I guess I'm curious, what do you say to those people who are kind of like, oh, I don't know if I have anything to say, because perhaps it doesn't feel like my story is particularly interesting enough, or whatever the excuse it might, you know, it might be that we give?
Well, I would argue that because we all have so many stories to tell, you know, and sometimes it's true. Like, I think it's that inner critic that thinks, oh, I don't have anything to say, but that's not true at all. We all have like so many different episodes that happen in our life that are so rich. You know, we have so much about our own stories, our childhood, whatever, you know, all those little stories that happen to us every day. And it's just so important that we write about them, that we reflect on them, because all of those little stories that ultimately kind of like shape you as a person. So all the people that you've met, all the things that you do in your everyday, or, you know, in the past as well, those are the little stories that then kind of like create also who you are. You know, you learn from those stories, all the stories that, you know, your parents told you as well, like everything kind of like inform you as a person. So I don't believe that we don't have a story that's not worth telling.
It kind of links back to what you said earlier about our unique kind of points of view, right? Because we all have different lived experiences. And even though there are many common themes that we can relate to, we've also perhaps had very unique kind of perspectives and takes on things because of our lived experience. So like you talked about, you know, the kind of childhood experiences and various things. We all have, we all have different kind of, really a different lens that we're looking at at life through, right?
Exactly. And I think that if you think about it, this is just one, I think in itself, this is already a reason, a very, very good reason to just tell your story, because you are unique. There is any, like, nobody can be like you. So, for all the things that make you unique, your story, your background, the lens through which you see the world, that's your story. So I think that is the number one reason why your story is yours, and nobody can tell your story better than you. So yeah, absolutely, every story is worth telling.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm curious then whether you can help us, or for anyone who would like to tell their story, or even, really kind of just dip their toe in that world, what can they do and how can they start? How can they make a start?
Big question. I guess. So for me, writing stories, it's kind of like two ways. So of course there is like the journaling or writing for well-being, depending how you want to call it. But there is like that element of writing, and then there is like the creative writing. So whether you write poems or a novel or a short stories. And I kind of like do both. So I'm in between. I love doing both at different times. So it really depends what, you feel like called to do, whether you just want to kind of like journal. And I mean, there are so many different prompts. One thing I think, if you're just at the start, that can help with your journaling is just free writing. I think free writing is just really, really good because there are no rules at all. It's literally just you and your pen. If you like to write with a pen and paper, that's how I love to write, because I just feel it's more, I don't know, I just really love the connection of like writing down, and I like the ink on the paper and stuff. It makes the experience a bit different to me rather than just typing on my computer. So I think free writing is great because, yeah, there are no rules. You don't have to make perfect sense. You don't have to follow like grammar at all. It's just you and your thoughts. It's just kind of like, okay, I've got a blank page and I can just jot down all my thoughts, whatever is going on in my head, I'll just put it down on paper.
Yeah.
And that's just really easy. You don't have to do anything else. Although I know that sometimes people feel stuck with the beginning, but you can just start by, today I'm feeling, and you start with your feeling, or I'm here today and this is how, and this is what I want to write about. And sometimes the repetition, I know it sounds silly, but sometimes like if you repeat the same sentence a few times, that can help you and can prompt you to actually write a bit more. So yeah, I guess people sometimes get a bit scared of a blank page. And I know that can be scary, but I always try to reframe the blank page with, okay, this is my canvas of possibilities. I can do whatever I want. It's just possibility for me. It's a white space, but it means possibility. I can do whatever I want with it. And that really helps me.
Yeah. And I guess that, blank canvas and possibility means that you can't get it wrong.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
It's you can do whatever you like, and if you absolutely hate it, you also have the permission to tear it up or burn it or whatever way you'd want to get rid of it. But I'm glad that you mentioned kind of, because I think when I first came across free writing, I was like, but what do I do? It felt like the no rules aspect to it was almost too far, like too much freedom in a sense, because I was still kind of unclear, but like, what do I write about and what should it look like? And do the sentences have to be perfectly formed, or can I just literally, write whatever comes to mind? And that in itself felt like a bit of a stumbling block almost. But once I got over that and just allowed myself just to, write down whatever that comes to mind and whatever felt right in that moment, I think as you practice, and I guess it's a practice, isn't it? As you do that more and more, it becomes easier over time, I think.
Yeah. And then another thing that can help could be like you can set a time as well. So you can kind of like say, okay, I'm going to free write 5 minutes or 3 minutes every day, because that can help you to to kind of like get some focus as well. It's like, okay, I've only got 3 minutes. What do I want to, jot down about? Sometimes that can be helpful. But yeah, I think the idea that there isn't anybody like on your shoulder that tells you this is not okay. Like it's just you and your pen and paper. Like nobody can say, like you said before, this is not right, or you're not doing it in the right way. I think it's a way for you to feel unstuck, when you're so stuck in your thoughts and it feels so heavy. It's just like, I've got a place where I can just put all my thoughts and create that distance. And I think once you see your thoughts and feelings on paper, you do feel immediately, oh, okay, I've got to, you let them go. The burden is kind of like off your shoulder a little bit.
Yeah, no, I can completely relate to that actually journaling has really massively allowed me to kind of process stuff sometimes, and just kind of, or sometimes, you write things down, and as you're writing, things become a little bit more clear in your head. And that can be so useful, because we don't always have, or perhaps we don't always want to share things with other people. Perhaps we're not always ready. And actually that pen and paper is all you sometimes need, right? Just that space actually for expressing whatever's coming up for you.
Absolutely. It's like a friend, if you're not ready to share that, it could be like your best friend at the time. And I think, sorry, going back to your question, whereas, if you then write more creatively, like more creative writing, I think that's also that give you a space to be really to use your imagination as well, and really create those words and those characters and be fully immersed in those stories. So I also enjoy that aspect of writing, because it's like you can just kind of like travel through time and space and just create your own stories in a different way. So I think it's just, I'm just so passionate about writing and like all the different stories that you can create, whether it's journaling or novel, short stories, or a poem. I think you can learn so much about yourself through both type of writings.
Creative writing isn't something that or particularly fictional writing isn't something that I'm familiar with, but I've always wondered. I think it's interesting, isn't it, because we kind of put, not to bring this to me, just to talk about me, but we put certain limitations on ourselves, because we say, oh no, I'm not a writer, or I couldn't ever be a fictional writer, as an example, because X, Y, and Z. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we just assume these things, and that's with, goes with anything, not just writing, but anything in life. Sometimes we have those kind of limitations we impose on ourselves without really actually considering where they've come from or why they're there, and are they real? Because if I don't try something, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do it, or if I'm going to be any good, or any of these things, or even if I enjoyed doing it. It doesn't have to be good, and I don't have to share it with anyone at the end of the day, right?
Exactly.
I just thought it was, it's interesting, because I've always just assumed that no, that's not something I could ever do.
I think you can do absolutely anything. And then also remember that when I did a degree in creative writing, so there are things that you can learn, absolutely, like how to create stories and what are the fundamentals of a story. It's not just, of course there are so many talented writers, and there have been in the past that were just amazing, but it is something that, there is always a bit of controversial topic here. Some people say that no, you can't learn how to be a good writer, and other people say yes, you can. So I'm in the middle here, because it's true, you can learn so much, and that's what you do when you do a degree, or like all those courses in creative writing, you learn, and then you kind of like apply those learnings in your writing. So a little bit like photography as well, Then of course some people are just naturally talented, and other people learn.
There's a book I read, this just reminded me, called Mindset, by Dr. Carol Dweck, if I'm remembering her name correctly. And there's an example of, she talks about, fixed and growth mindset, and how a lot of the time, particularly when it comes to like artistic things, so, creative things like writing, or specifically, for example, drawing, she said that a lot of the time people just assume, I'm just not talented in drawing, so I can't do it. But there was this example of someone who had ran this course with people who never really drew, and she took them through the fundamentals of drawing and, you know, what they needed to do. And all of them could draw by the end of it. It was only a few weeks long. Maybe they weren't the best artists in the world, but that's not the point, right? They were able to learn. And so I think actually sometimes we need to be a little bit more open, maybe, to kind of like, actually, maybe I can. It's just, again, as with anything like this, it's like about the practice of doing it. I think for me, it's like you've got to kind of show up to see where it goes. You can't just assume from the start or after one kind of session, say, actually, this is not for me. If you enjoy it, obviously. If you don't enjoy it, then
yeah, like being curious and don't judge yourself, you know, like practice some mindfulness when you do it as well. So yeah, be open, curious. And like you said, you know, you might not enjoy it. So, okay, you know, it's not for you. Or maybe you find out, actually, I really enjoy this. This is an activity that, you know, I can continue, I can learn more. So, yeah, it's just about like applying those, I guess, a bit of mindfulness in those things as well, and see where it takes you and if it makes you happy doing it or not. But yeah, we can absolutely do anything.
I do really believe that. It doesn't, you know, we don't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be a super high standard, does it? But I think we have those high expectations to begin with, and that can sometimes be a barrier in itself.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, again, led me on to the next question very nicely. I wanted to ask about mindfulness and combining mindfulness and writing together. What do you think are the benefits of doing that, and how might we do that?
Yeah, so I always say that for me, writing and mindfulness go hand in hand, and they can be very powerful for our well-being. So there are just so many things that kind of like connect with these two activities. So mindfulness is about like being fully present and aware of what's going on inside and outside of us, being aware of our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. And it's also about, like, you know, as we said before, about slowing down, being curious, being open. And I think, you know, writing is also very similar in that sense that, you know, being curious and being open can help you with your writing, whether you're writing fiction or whether you're journaling. Because it, you know, it's all about, like, you know, if you're journaling, you are going to kind of like check in with yourself and, you know, and then jot those things down. Whereas if you are maybe writing fiction, then being open and curious can help you, you know, with your characters when you build your story as well, to make it more believable. You know, I'm thinking about when we use the senses as well, when we go out for a walk, and I always say, oh, go for a mindful walk and use your senses. What can you see? What can you smell? All those things can help you, not just to make you feel grounded, and then you can use that in your journaling, but then if we use this for a more creative writing aspects, like all those elements can really help to enrich your story, you know, all those, the settings or the characters behaving in a certain way. So if you think about it, like all those things really complement each other. And so the activity of writing, I think it is a mindful activity in itself, like even painting, or I go back to like all those creative activities as well, like as much as painting or coloring, drawing, photography, all those mindful activities where you are really immersed in it. And you are really in this, what we call like flow states, when you are so immersed in something that it doesn't really matter what happened in the past or what happens in the future. So, you know, oftentimes in our day-to-day, we're kind of like stuck in past and future, and we're never really that present. So, but when we are practicing those activities, that's where we are in the here and now, where we actually, ideally, that's where we want to be, you know, because otherwise it gets very overwhelming and stressful if we're constantly think about, oh, I said that, or I did that, or what am I going to do tomorrow, you know, like kind of like all the checklist and all that to-do list. So when we are writing, you know, this is where we kind of like, we feel like, okay, you know, all that matters now is just me writing, you know, my thoughts or my stories, and all that matters is that I'm here in the present, I'm enjoying this moment. So, and mindfulness is about like the present moment and enjoying the moment without kind of like judging ourselves, without necessarily having a goal in mind. Like we said before, like we don't have to always have that expectation. It's just about, I'm here now, I can slow down. All that matters is the here and now, basically.
Yeah. I'm curious how, or whether you've noticed a kind of an increase in people's interest in mindfulness and perhaps writing as well over the last year, whether you've noticed kind of a bit of a spike.
Yeah, I think I've done like loads of, so I had to pivot, like I only managed to do one workshops in real life, and then everything was kind of like pivoted online, which was a bit scary at the beginning because I was like, oh, I don't know how it's going to translate the real, kind of like face-to-face interaction. But then because of the particular moment that we were living, I kind of like, after a few moments when I started the workshop, I knew that, okay, women really need that, because they just wanted to share. They just wanted to talk about what was going on for them. And they just really needed that moment of, you know what, I just need to really disconnect and leave like all this heavy stuff that are happening and just take a moment for myself. And they all said that, like in different ways, for different reasons. They all needed that space for themselves to reconnect with themselves, their mind, their body, kind of like discovering what was going on for them. Because I think both writing and mindfulness can help you to really discover a bit more about yourself, and also see if there are any patterns. Sometimes we tend to do the same things and react to the situations or things the same way. And when you jot down those things, when you track those things, and then you can go back and you're like, oh yeah, I tend to do this all the time. And, actually doing this all the time makes me feel not that great. So maybe where can I adjust? Maybe next time I won't react the same way, and see what happens. So yeah, I felt like there was this need for women to have these spaces for themselves, to be more mindful, to just meditate, and also write down what was going on for them.
Yeah, I can see how, just making time for that would be so important, actually. Over the past 12, what are we up to, about 15 months now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, so we kind of chatted about this briefly before we hit record. We talked about you going part-time in your employed role and managing the two. So managing that part-time role with running of your business. How are you finding that, and how are you adjusting to that? Because I know that, working full-time and running a business on the side is super busy, but running things, alongside each other, where you've got two separate things to focus on, can actually be really tricky, even from like switching the focus from one to the other and all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious how that's going and how you're managing the two.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Because we were talking about this before, and I said I feel like sometimes we don't talk enough about this topic, like about actually managing two things at the same time. And we always talk about the, actually when people take the leap of faith, and then they've kind of like now in their own, like just running their own business, and how they've made it. And I said to you, like, I'm always interested in the in-between stories, like, okay, but what happened? Like, how did you get there? And how did you feel when you were running two things at the same time? Because that is incredibly hard. And I think also if you don't have like the right support, like a network as well that can help you at times, it can be really tricky. I am learning things every day. I feel like I'm still trying to navigate this transition period as well, and it's not easy. Yeah, like you said as well, it's also having, like, I feel like my brain has to switch from one job to the other, and sometimes that's not easy. And also when I work on Women Make Stories, I feel like I have so many ideas. I feel like super creative. Sometimes my brain never switches off from there as well. So I feel inspiration is everywhere for me. Like, I feel so receptive, and can be like a blessing, but sometimes it can also be a bit too much. It's like, oh, just switch off. Like, I don't want to think about it now. I just want to go for a walk, and that's it, And I think sometimes it's also about reminding myself that I am, when I work on Women Make Stories, like I can make my own decision. It's my business, because I think there is also this element of kind of like corporate environment and mentality that you kind of like bring with you, which is not helpful at all. So, that mentality, you always have to be on, you always have to be productive. And I'm trying to kind of like move away from that in my business and just go back to, it's my business. If, my priority will always be my well-being as well, and the well-being of the women I work with. So if I'm not 100%, I can't really deliver, that to the women I work with. So that's really important for me as well. So I'm still trying to, navigate that. But I would say it's not easy. And I know, especially actually when I was working full time, it was even worse because it was harder. And I think that was the time when I like burnt out for the first time, because it was just too much. It was such a big challenge. And of course, I felt grateful that I had like that stable income that actually helped me with, I don't know, doing my first photo shoot, or, all the things that can help you in your business. So you do feel grateful for that, but that doesn't mean it's less of a challenge. So I think this is where I'm at. Like I'm trying to navigate, set boundaries with it. But yeah, I would say it is a struggle, but I'm really keen to hear from other women as well. I think now we've started this conversation, it would be really interesting to hear from other women and their stories and how they're navigating this as well.
Yeah, I think you make such a good point that actually it it can be challenging as much as it can be exciting. And like you say, you've got lots of inspiration coming in and you feel really kind of excited about the ideas that you've got for your business. Obviously, there are time limitations. There's only so many hours in the day. And sometimes it can feel like, maybe that's just my own point of view, but sometimes I feel like I'm going too slow because I've got all these different things that I want to be getting on with. And actually, I think what you said earlier as well is, it's reminding ourselves that we're in control. We're able to make the decisions that actually are kind of going to suit us in terms of our, well-being and everything else as well. Because if we're not 100%, we're not showing up in a way that we want to then. So really being mindful of the fact that it's not a race and that we've got all the time in the world. And so and I think that is one of the hardest things when you're really excited about your business and where it can go, but actually having to pace yourself a little bit because that actually there's only so many hours and you've got the other work to kind of show up for as well.
Yeah, so you kind of like have to dose your energy as well. And yeah, I would say always put your well-being and your mental health at first, because then you're just going to suffer in the end if you can't actually protect that space for yourself. And I think, like you said, there is also this pressure because of, I would say, like social media, like the blessing and the curse of social media. Like, when we see other business constantly putting out stuff, and when you also have to juggle different things at the same time, and it can be like another work or family or whatever commitment you have, and then you go on social and you see that everybody's doing great, then of course you don't know what goes behind closed doors. But that sometimes can be a bit tricky as well, because you just feel like, oh, I need to, like you said before, just constantly do things and I'm a bit behind. And so it's just a reminder of you do you, and you take all the time that you need. You're on a different path, it's your path, and just kind of like you're in control. And this is why you also wanted to create this business, right? That's why I wanted to create my business, because I was burnt out and I just wanted to kind of like create something that suited me and my lifestyle. So it's important that then I go back to that and it's like, okay, I just want to slow down here. So that's important as well.
Yeah. I think it takes a bit of time. And to be honest, I'm a few years into running my business full time, and I ran it alongside a full-time job for a while as well, for a few years. There is a continuous like adjustment, and you kind of continuously have to be reminded or remind yourself that actually, okay, let's bring it back to basics. How do I want to feel, and what did I want this to actually look like? are we close, or am I veering off like too far down just a path that I didn't actually, and you talked about that kind of corporate conditioning. And I think it takes a very long time, I think, to kind of let go of the notion of like things, even the simplest of things like working a 9 to 5 and taking any time out within that window, because it feels like, well, I should be working, so why am I off doing something else? So yeah, it's just, I think it's that constant reminder that we need, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a constant reminder, and like, yes, you're doing just fine. You are doing exactly, what you need to do, just at your own pace.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so as we are coming kind of towards the end of the interview, I'm curious if there is one tip that you could give your younger self, and what would it be?
Oh, good question. I think I would tell young Daniela to always follow her heart and her intuition, and to take other people's advice with a pinch of salt. Because I think if I look back at my own story, I can see, of course, it's always different when you look back. You have that knowledge, right, that you didn't have at the time. So you have to be gentle with yourself. At the time, you only knew what you knew at the time. But looking back now, I can see so many occasions, so many episodes where I knew and I could feel in my heart and in my gut what I wanted to do. But then I ended up following what other people wanted me to do. And of course, that didn't really go down very well in the end, because it was a bit of a forced decision. I wasn't really following my path. But those mistakes were also lessons. So I think I've learned a lot from those things. So yeah, I think it's so important to follow our heart and our intuition, because ultimately we know what's best for us. And I think when we create, a life that kind of like aligns with our values and with what's important for us, that's where we really bloom, if that makes sense, because we are so aligned. We just create a life and a career that mirrors what's important for us. And I think, it's just like I would always want to encourage women to follow their heart and their intuition. I think it's just so important. I think when we don't do it, we suffer, and we can feel it. I mean, I'm very physical, so I know that when I do something that doesn't really align with myself or my values, or I really suffer. Like, my body tells me that. And then sometimes we suppress that, we bury that a little bit, because we feel scared, or we feel maybe other people would judge us, or whatever is going on in our life. But I think we know what we want in our heart. Like, it's kind of like it's screaming, do this, I'm here, I'm telling you, follow your heart, follow me. And I think sometimes all the answers are actually within ourselves. They're not in other people. So I think it's important that we believe in ourselves, and that we know that we have everything within ourselves. Like, all the tools are there. Sometimes we just need, and it takes a little bit longer, because we need to unlock all those things. But we absolutely have everything within ourselves. It's just a matter of like, I believe in myself. I know what I'm doing. I believe in these things that I'm trying to create, and I'm just going to go for it,
Yeah, I think it can take a bit of time to get to that point, right? Because if you've lived your life never really checking in with what feels right to you, or always ignoring that kind of gut feeling, like you talked about, that you had quite strong physical kind of reactions perhaps, but still for whatever reason, perhaps didn't listen to it. I think it takes, and again, just being kind of gentle with ourselves when we do that knowing that it's not always easy if we've never done it before, to kind of to follow that voice, and to sometimes take that leap of faith in a sense, because it can feel very kind of alien to us if we've never done it before.
It's not easy to follow your intuition and your heart. Because when you always kind of like this path, and you always like listen to other people, and then you feel like condition or pressure to do certain things, it's not easy at all. But I think it's important, because at the end of the day, it's our life. And we have to live it and make the best of it for ourselves, and we can't just follow other people just because they want us to to be this way, or they want us to do, this job or this career. Like, it's just, we are the only one that are going to suffer in the end. And I think, although people say, oh, I don't really know how to, like, if my intuition is talking to me, I think it's just a matter of like actually sitting down and try ways to connect with it, because I think our intuition and our heart always speaks to us. It's just about letting them speak a bit more louder. And I think, like you said, when we're so used to bury them, it's easy, but that voice is always there. It's just about, you know what, I'm going to trust that voice now, because I think what's best for you. That's like my mantra. It's true. We only know when we feel uncomfortable or when we feel forced, and how that makes us feel in our body and in our mind, and you don't want to live like that,
Yeah. Very wise words. Thank you. Okay. So where can people find you? Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, so people can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm more active on Instagram, trying to be as active on Facebook. But my handle is at Women Make Stories. And I love chatting to women. So feel free to say hello in my DM. And of course, like, all the information also about like Women Make Stories are on my website as well, which is womenmakestories.com. So I do workshops and also one-to-one sessions, which is a new offering. It's basically an 8-week program, let's call it this way, when we go through all the fundamentals of mindfulness and also how you can introduce mindfulness into your life. And then I weave in the writing as well. So it's always like a combination of writing and mindfulness, but it's more of a personalized journey. So we kind of like have a first call when we get to know each other, and we speak about like all the things that maybe you want to work on, and then I kind of like create a personalized program. And the most important things for me when we do this one-to-one is just that women feel like that they learn like all the little things in which they can introduce mindfulness into their life. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be 30 minutes of meditation. You just start slowly, and also pick and choose the things that realistically you can include in your day-to-day, because otherwise, if it doesn't feel something that you can actually do, in the long run, that you just want to end up doing it. So it's like all those little and gentle steps that can actually make you do more mindfulness and writing.
Yeah. And I love how I can see how much accountability that can give as well, having that one-to-one kind of space to explore what's coming up and to work through the different practices together, but also having that kind of gentle accountability of knowing that you're there to support someone through that journey as they explore mindfulness, perhaps sometimes for the first time as well.
And like, if they have any questions or if anything comes up, because I appreciate that sometimes when we meditate or write, certain emotions come up as well. So you stir a lot, actually, that sometimes you haven't, you start a meditation, you don't even know where your mind is, and then all of a sudden, wow, where is this coming from? Where is this emotion or memory coming from? So you need that space as well to reflect, and I think that's very important. And in a one-to-one, of course, you have a bit more time to explore that and to see like those patterns as well. So it's a special moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me today. So it's womenmakestories.com that people can find all of the information.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Anna.